Good morning, Munchkins. Dad is here once again, and Dad does what Dad does, and that's rant. So let me give you that initial thing from your word from your sponsor. If you like what you hear, please hit the share button at the end of this rant and share this with some friends. If you love what you hear, please hit the subscribe button. The subscriptions are free, and your subscriptions help me to create a whole lot more of these rants. All right, it's time to rock. Kiddos, you are indeed, I think, living in historic times. Maybe all times are historic. Your grandmother, who just died, lived to witness the Great Depression, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, World War II, the Cold War, the fall of the Soviet Union, and the rise of the Chinese Communist Party. You were born in time to witness airplanes crashing into the Twin Towers, the beginning of Cold War II, and in my estimation, the beginning of the end of NATO, the United Nations, and the European Union. I'm beginning to conclude that all times are historic. It just feels like there's a greater intensity this time around, probably due to the introduction of real-time media, which didn't exist, say, 30, 40 years ago. One of the most historic events to have occurred during your short lifetimes was that you got to witness the reversal of one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in history. That was the reversal of Roe versus Wade. The Roe v. Wade case managed to simultaneously insult both the moral code and the Constitution. The insult to the moral code presented by this case is obvious. The killing of children is always, everywhere, and at all times immoral and wrong. This rant will not focus on that aspect of the case. This rant will strictly focus on the constitutionality of the case. That this case was unconstitutional was obvious from the beginning as well. There is no mention of abortion anywhere in the text of the Constitution. The 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution makes it clear that abortion is an issue to be decided at the state level, not at the federal level. The amendment to the Constitution reads as follows, and I quote, "The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." So the proper mechanism to institute a law at the federal level to mandate abortion would be to pass an amendment to the Constitution. But that would require that the Democratic Party persuade the citizens of the individual states to ratify such an amendment to the Constitution. The Democratic Party knew that popular opinion was opposed to such a measure. So, to subvert the will of the people, the party appealed to leftist members of the Supreme Court who were willing to overstep their mandate and make Roe v. Wade the law of the land. In spite of the fact that this decision is a direct affront to the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it took over 50 years for the court to reverse this egregious affront to the Constitution. At the cost of roughly 64 million babies murdered, Roe v. Wade was finally reversed in 2022. The Democratic Party can still pursue its goal of mandating abortion at the federal level by pursuing an amendment to the Constitution. But it will not pursue the amendment route because it knows that the general population knows this is evil and will not support it. And this brings me to Obergefell versus Hodges. This is the landmark Supreme Court case in 2015, which mandated that states recognize same-sex marriage. The Democratic Party used the same strategy to implement Obergefell versus Hodges as it did to implement Roe v. Wade 50 years earlier. The party knew its position would not be approved by the citizens, so to bypass the will of the people, it appealed to a leftist court that was willing to subvert the Constitution. My gut tells me that the time is right to revisit this judicial travesty. Yes, it is true that the makeup of the court favors a constitutional ruling rather than a judicial power grab. So from a timing perspective, now appears to be the time. But I think the bigger and more important reason that the time is right to revisit this case is that the citizens have been able to see for themselves the disaster that ensues when we attempt to separate morality from law. Since the approval of gay marriage in 2015, we have witnessed a decline into the abyss in terms of common sense and morality. We've witnessed men destroying women in sports with the approval of the media and the intellectual elite. We've witnessed Fortune 500 companies intentionally promoting gender confusion as a moral good. We've witnessed spectacular incompetence at all levels of government and private industry as a result of DEI hiring practices, to include airplanes crashing and urban fires in Los Angeles. The citizenry has witnessed teenage rage riots in major cities. Social media is rife with images for Frontier and Spirit Airlines, the Waffle House and Cruise Carnival lines, portraying civilizational destruction that results from not adhering to the moral code. The common citizen may not be able to articulate the connection between the misalignment of law and morality, but that does not mean they don't see and understand that there is indeed a connection. And there is indeed a connection. You cannot destroy the vehicle designed to create a moral being and then be surprised when you get an immoral being at the end of the process. Obergefell versus Hodges, like Roe v. Wade, represents an attack on the vehicle designed by God himself to create moral beings. And that vehicle is a family headed by a man and a woman. Obergefell versus Hodges removes one of the coaches from the family team. Roe v. Wade kills the players on the family team. It's tough enough to play the game without one of the head coaches. It's impossible to play the game without the players. We the people are ready for the Supreme Court to catch up and align law with morality once again. A great place to start that process will be by reversing Obergefell versus Hodges. It won't be the first time that the Supreme Court has had to fix a problem created by their predecessors, and I'm certain it won't be the last. Remember from your homeschool classwork? In Plessy versus Ferguson back in 1896, the Supreme Court decided that separate but equal was the best way to run a society, and that became the law of the land. This case was a case that the Democratic Party used to support Jim Crow laws. The KKK was the enforcement arm of the Democratic Party. For the life of me, I can't figure out why Republicans are afraid to educate people on this history. Why are they leaving it to me? In 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education, the Supreme Court reversed Plessy versus Ferguson. This case stated that separate but equal is by definition unequal in practice. So it took 58 years for the Brown versus the Kansas Board of Education case to come along and fix Plessy versus Ferguson and fix that disaster. It took 49 years for Dobbs versus Jackson to fix the disastrous Roe v. Wade. I suggest that we not take 5 decades to reverse the disastrous Obergefell versus Hodges. My guess is that within the next 5 years, the Supreme Court will be rehearing this disaster, and we'll see a return to morality. We the people are ready for some morality. Ciao, everybody. Peace out. Dad.